An Italian diver discovers an astonishing U-boat wreck. The submarine is virtually intact, resting nearly 400 feet underwater. 70 years ago, packs of German submarines traveled the seas, relentlessly attacking Allied supply ships.
Imagine a submarine so secret, it doesn't exist on any map, in any archive, or in any history book. Yet there it lies, 28 meters beneath the South Atlantic, carrying a cargo so valuable or so dangerous that 3 governments are racing to keep it sealed. U-456, erased from history, scuttled by its own crew, and hiding a secret that could rewrite the final days of World War II. What's inside that cargo hold? Gold, documents, or something far more sinister? Today, we step into a story history tried to bury, and the deeper we go, the more dangerous it becomes. U-456, the lost sub. To understand why U-456 matters, you first need to understand something about the world it came from. And more importantly, you need to understand that this submarine did not arrive in a vacuum. Argentina has a long, documented, and deeply uncomfortable history with Nazi fugitives. That history is not speculation, it is government record. And in 2025, for the first time in 80 years, those records started coming into the light. On March 25, 2025, Argentine President Javier Milei ordered the declassification of all government-held files related to Nazi activity in the country.
Argentina's President Javier Milei says that he is declassifying government documents on how Nazi war criminals escaped Europe and resettled in South America following World War II.
The announcement was not spontaneous. It followed a direct request from United States Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who had been investigating previously unknown Nazi-linked bank accounts at Credit Suisse and its predecessor institutions. It also followed a meeting between Milei and officials from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the Los Angeles-based Jewish human rights organization that has spent decades tracking the rat lines, the escape networks that funneled thousands of Nazi war criminals out of Europe and into South America after the war. The scope of what Argentina was agreeing to reveal was staggering. The Cabinet Chief Guillermo Francos confirmed that the files would include intelligence bulletins, financial records, and banking transactions held primarily by Argentina's defense ministry. Documents that detailed how fugitives entered the country, who protected them, and where the money went. By April 2025, the General Archive of the Nation had released an initial batch of 1,850 digitized files to the public, containing intelligence reports on figures including Adolf Eichmann.
The man is snatched by agents of the Israeli intelligence service Mossad. His name is Adolf Eichmann.
Yosef Mengele and Martin Bormann. Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, had lived openly in Buenos Aires under the alias Ricardo Clement until Mossad agents snatched him off a street in 1960. Mengele, the Angel of Death, had entered Argentina in 1949 using forged papers under the name Gregor Helmut. A 1999 government commission had already confirmed that at least 180 Nazi war criminals had settled in Argentina. Some historians estimate the true number was closer to 5,000. But here is the part that most people miss. The declassification did not just open old filing cabinets, it opened old questions. And one of the oldest, most persistent questions in post-war history is this: what else came to Argentina on those submarines? Because we know, as verified historical fact, that at least 2 German U-boats defied Admiral Karl Donitz's direct surrender order in May 1945 and sailed to Argentina instead. The first was U-530, a Type 9C long-range submarine commanded by 25-year-old Oberleutnant Otto Wermuth. U-530 surfaced off the coast of Mar del Plata on July 10, 1945, 2 full months after Germany's surrender. When Argentine Marines boarded the vessel, they found a haggard crew, carrying no identification. The ship's logbook was missing. The deck gun had been thrown overboard. The anti-aircraft ammunition, radar equipment, and code books had all been jettisoned. Weymouth could not adequately explain why the voyage had taken over 100 days, or what the submarine had been doing during weeks of unaccounted time in the Atlantic. Argentine and American interrogators pressed him on whether the submarine had landed passengers or cargo along the coast before surrendering. He denied it. They did not believe him. 5 weeks later, on August 17th, a second submarine appeared. U-977, a Type 7 boat commanded by 24-year-old Heinz Schäfer, resurfaced near Mar del Plata after an extraordinary voyage that included 66 consecutive days submerged, the second longest underwater passage of the entire war. Schäfer was immediately accused by an Anglo-American commission of having transported Adolf Hitler to South America. He denied it and later wrote a book about the voyage. But the suspicion never fully dissipated. Both submarines were seized by the United States Navy, transported to American waters, and sunk during torpedo target practice. Whatever secrets they carried went to the bottom with them, and for decades the official position was clear. U-530 and U-977 were the only German submarines that escaped to Argentina. Case closed, except it was not closed. Argentine Colonel Romulo Bustos, who commanded a coastal artillery battery at Mar del Plata during the summer of 1945, reported in his memoirs that his unit had discovered a hidden supply cache in a coastal cave before the submarines arrived. Canned provisions, wooden planks, and evidence of recent human activity. He wrote that he had no doubt this was a support point for German submarines or for disembarking clandestine passengers. He sent a detailed report to Army Command. It was never made public. And now, 80 years later, with Argentina's files finally cracking open, a third submarine has surfaced. Not from the archives, from the ocean floor. U-456 carries a hull designation that appears in no Kriegsmarine construction record, no Allied intelligence database, and no post-war accounting. Naval historian Dr. Marcus Webb, who has spent 34 years documenting German submarine operations, examined the wreck data and was unequivocal. That level of erasure from military archives does not happen by accident. That is deliberate concealment. When the Argentine Coast Guard deployed remotely operated vehicles to photograph the wreck in September 2025, the images revealed something that shattered the assumption that this was just another lost wartime vessel. The submarine had been custom modified with a reinforced cargo hold measuring 14 feet by 18 feet, sealed behind a pressure door with 4 separate locking mechanisms. Standard Type 7 and Type 9, U-boats had cargo spaces roughly half that size, secured with a single lock. Whatever was loaded into U-456 before it left Germany required twice the space and 4 times the security of anything the Kriegsmarine normally transported. And whoever ordered those modifications had enough authority to build a submarine entirely off the books. Within weeks, the site was declared an international war grave. Within months, a private maritime archaeology firm led by Dr. Elena Vasquez had obtained exclusive access to document the wreck. She had previously investigated Nazi-era shipwrecks in the Baltic Sea. She had connections to intelligence networks most academics never see, and she was about to become the first person in 80 years to look inside the vessel that Germany, the Allies, and history itself had agreed did not exist. The Lost Reich Gold. Deep Atlantic Research's first dive took place on January 8, 2026. Water temperature was 11 degrees Celsius. Visibility was less than 6 meters. And at 28 meters of depth, every movement was deliberate and slow, every breath calculated. The team spent 6 hours on that initial dive, documenting the exterior, taking measurements, photographing every surface they could reach. What they observed before even entering the vessel told its own story.
A shipwreck mystery has been solved after divers uncovered a vessel. Though dived before, the wreck was never identified until now.
The submarine's deck gun had been removed, not damaged in combat. Deliberately unbolted, lifted off, and the mounting brackets filled with concrete to prevent reinstallation. And the deck showed no signs of depth charge damage, no torpedo impacts, no evidence of engagement with Allied forces. This boat had not been sunk in battle. It had been scuttled, deliberately flooded and sent to the bottom by its own crew. Maritime forensics expert Thomas Kellerman, who later analyzed the dive footage, confirmed that the scuttling technique matched procedures used specifically by U-boat crews who were destroying evidence, not abandoning a damaged vessel, destroying what it carried. Now, Dr. Vasquez described the experience in an expedition log that was never intended for public release, but surfaced 2 weeks after the dive. The moment we approached the conning tower, she wrote, I knew this was not a standard military vessel. The external plating showed signs of hasty construction, welding marks that did not match German naval standards, sections that appeared to be reinforced after initial assembly. See, whoever built this boat was working fast and was not concerned with following regulations. That observation alone tells us something critical. Standard U-boat construction followed rigorous engineering protocols enforced by the Kriegsmarine. Deviations meant court-martial. The only scenario in which those protocols would be abandoned is if the vessel was being built outside normal channels, for a purpose that superseded standard military operations. On January 15th, 1 week after the first dive, the team returned with industrial cutting equipment. It took 7 hours to breach the main hatch. Decades of salt corrosion had fused the metal into something nearly impenetrable. When the hatch finally gave way and the cameras penetrated the interior, the submarine had flooded, but not completely. Trapped air pockets had preserved entire sections of the vessel in near-perfect condition. And in those preserved sections, the evidence began to accumulate in ways that no one on the team was prepared for. The forward compartment, where the crew would have operated during the voyage, contained personal effects that shattered every expectation. Leather suitcases, not the standard issue canvas bags carried by German sailors, but the expensive monogrammed kind used by wealthy civilian travelers in the 1940s. Sealed metal containers stamped with Reichsbank markings. The Reichsbank was Germany's central bank, the institution responsible for the nation's gold reserves and high-value currency. Dr. Vasquez counted 47 of these containers in the forward hold alone, each one measuring approximately 12 inches by 18 inches by 6 inches deep. 47 containers, bearing the official stamp of the institution that managed the wealth of the Third Reich, sitting in a submarine that was never supposed to exist. But it was the sealed cargo hold that truly changed the calculus of this investigation. When the team used sonar-penetrating equipment to scan beyond the pressured door, they detected significant mass, objects with density readings consistent with precious metals. Preliminary calculations based on the scan data indicated approximately 2,300 kilograms of material. That is over 5,000 pounds. If even half of that mass turns out to be gold, the cargo would be worth approximately $140 million at current market prices. Adjusted for 1945 values, it would represent roughly 8% of Germany's entire gold reserve. 8% of a nation's wealth, sealed in the belly of a submarine that does not appear in a single record anywhere on Earth. The captain's log of everything recovered from U-456. The navigation logs may be the most consequential, and they were found in a waterproof case bolted to the captain's station, and while water damage had claimed portions of the text, enough survived for Dr. Vasquez's team to photograph every page before further deterioration could destroy them. What those pages contain has forced historians to reconsider timelines they thought were settled decades ago. The logs establish that U-456 departed from Kiel, Germany on April 28, 1945. That date alone is staggering. Through April 28th was 2 days before Adolf Hitler's official death on April 30th.
On April 30th, 1945,
Adolf Hitler commits suicide as Soviet forces close in on his underground bunker in Berlin.
2 days before the man who had built the Third Reich supposedly put a pistol to his head in a bunker beneath Berlin. The war was collapsing. The Soviet army was blocks away from the Reich Chancellery. Allied forces were closing in from the west. And in the middle of that apocalyptic chaos, someone had the authority, the resources, and the organizational capacity to load a custom-built submarine with Reichsbank containers, civilian passengers, and a cargo hold full of material dense enough to register as precious metal on sonar and send it across the Atlantic. The route logged in the captain's records shows a northern passage around Scotland, then a southwestern course across the open Atlantic, with a final position marked at coordinates that place the vessel exactly where the wreck now sits, to 4 kilometers off the Argentine coast. The voyage was methodical, planned. Not the desperate flight of a rogue captain making a last-ditch run for freedom, but a calculated operation executed with precision. And then there is the entry that has generated more debate than any other single piece of evidence in this case. Dated May 7, 1945, the day Germany officially surrendered, the captain wrote in tight, cramped German script, "We have maintained maximum depth for 72 hours. And passengers are stable. Cargo is secure. No Allied contact. Passengers. Not crew, not officers, not prisoners, passengers." In the entire documented history of German submarine warfare, that word does not appear in operational logs.
Germany announces an exclusion zone of unrestricted submarine warfare. A campaign to attack all enemy ships, military and civilian, without warning.
U-boats carried crew. They carried military personnel. Occasionally, they carried prisoners of war. They did not carry passengers. The use of that word transforms the entire nature of the voyage. This was not a military operation. This was an extraction. As someone was being transported out of a collapsing Germany, and they were important enough to warrant a submarine that had been scrubbed from every record. Now consider the timeline more carefully. The historically documented case of U-977, the German submarine that famously escaped to Argentina after the war, took 99 days to make a comparable Atlantic crossing. U-977 traveled as fast as possible, running on the surface with a single engine to conserve fuel. It arrived in Argentina in mid-August 1945. U-456, a heavier vessel carrying a larger cargo, completed the journey in approximately 63 days, 36 days faster. That difference is not explainable by superior seamanship alone. That kind of advantage requires infrastructure, resupply points, refueling stations, someone waiting along the route to provide fuel, provisions, and updated navigational intelligence. The navigation charts recovered from U-456 confirm exactly that. They contain markings for coordinates that do not appear on any standard maritime map. When those coordinates were cross-referenced with declassified Allied intelligence reports, they matched locations identified by British and American agencies as German supply stations, hidden refueling points in the mid-Atlantic that were supposedly dismantled before the war ended. If U-456 used those stations, it means someone was still operating them weeks after Germany's unconditional surrender. Someone was keeping the lights on, the fuel flowing, and the escape routes open. This was not a lone submarine making a desperate run. This was a network, and it was functioning after the Reich had officially ceased to exist. One more detail. Radio equipment recovered from the communications station was found tuned to a specific frequency. When investigators checked that frequency against wartime intelligence records, and it matched a channel that British code breakers had identified as being used by what became known as the rat lines. The Vatican connected networks that facilitated the escape of Nazi war criminals to South America in the months and years following the war. The fact that U-456's radio was configured to receive transmissions on that exact frequency is not coincidence. It is coordination. DNA, ghosts, and governments. Forensic analysis of the personal effects recovered from U-456's forward compartment has added a dimension to this story that moves it from historical mystery into something far more volatile. The Argentine Forensic Anthropology Team, the same institution that pioneered the identification of Argentina's own disappeared during the Dirty War, conducted DNA testing on fabric samples taken from one of the leather suitcases found in the submarine. The testing was performed in late January 2026. The full results remain classified. But a source familiar with the analysis, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the genetic markers recovered from those fabric samples were cross-referenced against a database of known Nazi leadership family lines. The source would not specify which family produced the match, but they stated that the match probability exceeded 92%. Let that settle for a moment. A DNA recovered from personal belongings inside a submarine that officially does not exist matches, with over 92% probability, the genetic profile of a Nazi leadership family. The implications of that single data point are enormous. It narrows the list of possible passengers to a very small number of individuals. And depending on which name ultimately surfaces, it could force a fundamental re-examination of the final chapter of the Second World War. And then there is the sealed cargo hold. The pressure door securing that compartment has remained unopened.
Images just coming in tonight, the disaster at a U.S. port. Dozens of shipping containers falling off a cargo ship and right into the water.
Not because Dr. Vasquez's team lacks the capability to breach it. The equipment is available. The technical expertise is in place. The hold remains closed because 3 separate governments have filed legal injunctions preventing any further access. Germany, Argentina, and the United States have each submitted formal legal challenges. The official justification is the preservation of a designated war grave. That is the public explanation. It is clean, bureaucratic, and almost impossible to challenge in court. But consider what is actually at stake. If the sonar readings are accurate, that hold contains over 2,000 kilograms of material with the density signature of precious metals. If it is gold, it represents a portion of the estimated 600 metric tons that vanished from German reserves in the final weeks of the war. Gold that was supposedly accounted for in post-war reparations. Gold that funded reconstruction, stabilized economies, and greased the diplomatic machinery that rebuilt Europe. If a significant cache of that gold has been sitting at the bottom of the South Atlantic for 80 years, it raises questions that extend far beyond history. It raises questions about restitution, about liability, about which institutions knew and chose to remain silent. Some investigators believe the cargo hold contains something even more dangerous than gold. Documentation. The kind of meticulous German record-keeping that tracked financial transactions, named collaborators, identified institutions that facilitated the transfer of looted assets. If those records survived in the same waterproof conditions that preserved the captain's log, and they could implicate banks, corporations, and government agencies that have operated for decades under the assumption that the paper trail was destroyed, the financial exposure alone could run into the billions. The reputational damage would be incalculable. And then there is the darkest theory. A small number of researchers have suggested that the hold may contain remains, evidence of passengers who did not survive the 63-day voyage. If DNA analysis confirms who those individuals were, well, the consequences move beyond finance and reputation into the realm of the foundational historical narratives that entire nations have been built upon. Were the people on that submarine who we think they were? Did the war really end the way we were taught? Carlos Mendez is a fisherman. He has worked the waters near Necochea for 42 years. His hands are thick and weathered, and he does not care much about geopolitics. But he remembers what his grandfather told him. His grandfather was 18 years old in the summer of 1945, working on his father's fishing boat. One night in early July, they saw lights moving slowly far offshore. When they went to investigate the next morning, there was nothing there. But the water smelled like diesel fuel. There were oil slicks on the surface. The Coast Guard came the following day and told everyone to stay away from that area for a full month. No explanation, no follow-up, just stay away. For 80 years. Now that story was a family curiosity. A fisherman's tale passed down over dinner tables. Now, it is corroborating evidence. The silence. Here is where the story stands as of right now, and here is what should concern you. Dr. Elena Vasquez has not given a single public interview since January 26, 2026. Her social media accounts went dark overnight. No farewell post, no explanation, just silence. Deep Atlantic Research, the firm she led, has suspended all operations. And their website displays nothing but a holding message. The special permit that authorized their access to the wreck has been revoked by the Argentine government, citing safety concerns. Maritime law experts who reviewed the revocation have stated publicly that the justification does not align with standard procedural norms. Safety concerns is a catch-all phrase that governments deploy when the real reason cannot be spoken aloud. The diplomatic maneuvering has been equally telling. Germany has formally requested that all artifacts recovered from U-456 be transferred to German custody. Argentina has refused.
There was a ceremony in Parliament marking 80 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp in 1945. The camp in Nazi-occupied Poland was at the center of Germany's campaign.
The stated reason is sovereign jurisdiction over wrecks in Argentine territorial waters. The unstated reason, according to sources close to the negotiation, is that Argentina has no intention of handing over evidence that could be permanently sealed in German government archives. The United States, meanwhile, has deployed a naval survey vessel to the area. The official purpose is oceanographic research. No one familiar with the situation believes that explanation. The Argentine government initially committed to releasing the full findings of the investigation in March 2026. That deadline was pushed to June. As of now, officials will not commit to any specific date. Each delay is accompanied by vague references to ongoing forensic analysis and the complexity of international legal frameworks. Each delay makes it less likely that the public will ever see the complete record of what was found inside U-456. And the questions keep multiplying. Who authorized the construction of a submarine outside the Kriegsmarine's official records? Who had the power to erase a vessel from every archive in Germany? Who loaded those Reichsbank containers, and what exactly did they hold? Who were the passengers that the captains log references with such careful, deliberate language? Who maintained the refueling stations along the Atlantic route weeks after Germany's surrender? And who, in 2026, is working so hard to ensure that the sealed cargo hold of U-456 remains exactly that, sealed? What we can verify as fact is this. U-456 existed. It was deliberately excluded from official records. It carried cargo and passengers across the Atlantic Ocean in the final days of the Second World War. It was scuttled by its own crew off the coast of Argentina in approximately early July 1945. And 80 years later, what remains sealed inside its cargo hold is significant enough that 3 of the world's most powerful governments are engaged in a coordinated effort to prevent anyone from opening it. Whether that cargo is gold, whether it is documentation, whether it is something far more disturbing, and the evidence we already have is enough to say this with confidence. The story of how World War II ended is incomplete. There is a chapter missing, and that chapter may be resting 28 meters beneath the cold, dark waters of the South Atlantic, waiting for someone with enough authority or enough courage to finally read it aloud. The submarine rests beneath the waves, silent and untouched, its cargo hold sealed for 8 decades. What lies inside is a secret that has survived war, governments and time itself. And while investigators probe, scanners hum, and diplomats maneuver behind closed doors, the answer remains just out of reach. When that hatch is finally opened, will it confirm what we suspect, or shatter everything we thought we knew about history. The ocean keeps its secrets for now. But how long before they surface?